Hi, this is Dolly Webber. Welcome back to Strangers in the Oil. Today I'd like to talk about one of those arguments that Christians love to use to uphold the idea that doctors are okay and that God approves of them, etc., etc. And that argument is the phrase, Luke was a physician. Now, Luke was one of the disciples of Jesus who left what they were doing and followed him, which is what he asks of us. They walked and talked with him day in and day out and learned from him and watched how he ministered and copied how he ministered for 3 entire years. And during all that time, they learned a whole new knowledge of the kingdom of heaven and were able to begin to minister themselves with that knowledge and by the same Spirit that Jesus did what he did. Luke was one of them. And Luke came from the profession of physician, as did Matthew come from the profession of tax collector. Peter came from the profession of fisherman, and so forth. People in that day were generally known by their profession. They were named by their first name and then usually followed by what they did for a living. Today we have surnames which are also typified often by what that person did for a living or what that person's ancestors did. As we have in the last names of Cook and Baker and Weaver and so forth, all of those were professions of those individuals, and that name got passed down for the centuries afterwards. Well, Luke had been a physician, and I can just imagine as people put forth this argument and proudly say Luke was a physician, they are picturing a disciple somehow robed in a similar garb as today's physicians, so-called, a white robe, and possibly with a placard on his hut or whatever they might think. Anyway, they are under a spell, and it is a spell. It is a picture that has been painted without truth to quickly give those that want to embrace it the idea that Luke continued to be a doctor, much like the doctors that we have of today. While the doctors of today are a little bit more difficult to expose due to the fact that they do their business in an office and in a way that reminds people of other objective types of fields or lines of profession, at the time that Luke was living, the doctors or physicians were not at all like those of today, resembling people of legitimate, objective professions. In fact, they were called priests, and rightly so. In fact, they did their business in temples, and rightly so. They were operating in pagan religion. These were Asclepian temples, and as I mentioned in the video about the oath, Asclepius, now it does refer to Satan, but he was in fact the son of Apollo, who was actually the offspring of Satan. Now he is referenced as the Antichrist, and that does refer to Satan, but I did want to make that correction from that video on the oath, who Apollo, Asclepius, and Satan, how they were all interconnected, but they all are. They're all, you got Satan, and he gave birth, or his son is Apollo, who represents the Antichrist, and then Asclepius, who is the son of Apollo. Anyway, the fallen angel Asclepius, who was a very real demonic entity, who was acknowledged in the Hippocratic Oath that most doctors, word for word, have stated in order to do their practice. Asclepius had temples. And when people came to those temples, i.e. to the doctors in Luke's day, they would come for an overnight stay. And when they went there, they knowingly invoked dreams from Asclepius. They considered him a very real person, demonic person, and often Asclepius would appear to them in their dreams. I'll also make note that at those temples there were snakes that were deliberately allowed and invited to roam the floors of these temples. Interesting, huh? Well, what would happen next? The doctors, i.e. the priests, i.e. what Luke would do, would visit the patients in the morning and find out if they had a dream, if Asclepius, the fallen angel, the demon god Asclepius, had successfully appeared to that individual/patient in their dream. And if he did, the doctor/Luke/Asclepian priest would ask that individual what instructions the demon angel gave them. And then the doctor/Luke/Asclepian priest would try to carry out what that dream was. Can you get my drift? That's what the doctors were back then. And actually, it's kind of a good thing because at least they were upfront with their craft. They were upfront with who they represented. Definitely not the God of the Bible. Definitely had nothing to do with holiness. It had everything to do with lifting up the religion of paganism. And that is what the craft today does as well, though it is cloaked successfully, for the most part, cloaked with the aura of science and objectivity and white coats and all that. Anyway, that's what Luke was doing before he came to Jesus. And he, like all of the other disciples, dropped their previous calling, their previous professions, and they followed Jesus. They learned holiness. They learned truth from Jesus. They learned about the kingdom of heaven. They got to know Jesus personally, intimately, and walked and talked with him and copied him and did what he did. Everything that Jesus faced, everything that he encountered with people in ministry, the disciples copied what Jesus did. And you can be sure that unless we have confirmed in Scripture that Luke left the Lord, that he went back into the world and forsook all that Jesus had taught him, he most certainly never returned to being an Asclepian priest/doctor ever again. That is the truth of that. And if you would like to look into the history of medicine and look into this yourself, check it out. Asclepian temples, Asclepian priests/doctors. That is what Luke did before he met the Master. And you better believe that once he encountered Jesus, and once he walked in the steps of Jesus and was sent out to do what Jesus did, he never returned to that abominable pagan practice ever again. No, Luke was a disciple of Jesus, and that is how we remember him. I look forward to talking to you the next time. God bless you.